A meeting last night between organized labor and the leadership of the National Assembly to try to find a middle ground and prevent the proposed nationwide strike by labor ended in a stalemate, with Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress insisting they would go ahead with the strike today while negotiations on their demands could continue. President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, told journalists in Abuja that efforts by the National Assembly leadership to convince the labor unions to suspend the strike had failed. Akpabio noted with concern that organized labor's action would paralyze the economy and bring more hardship to Nigerians. Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, advised labor against its planned nationwide strike, saying it would be both premature and illegal. Yet, President of TUC, Comrade Festus Osifo, commended Edo State Governor Mr. Godwin Obaseki for prioritizing the welfare of workers in the state and increasing their minimum wage to 70,000 naira, the highest in the country.
In the last 4 hours, we have been making appeals, and we are still appealing to the leadership of the NLC and the TUC to quickly return to the negotiating table with government with a view to finding a lasting solution on this minimum wage issue.
One is that we have agreed to prevail on the government to revisit the issue of the 35,000 Nigerian workers wage award that was started in October last year and stopped in February.
We have had him, but it is not possible for us to sit here and call off any industrial action because there are condition precedents given to us by our neck. We would have been much more happier if this evening that the issues of we have a great understanding that by tomorrow morning we will sign off issues bordering on the minimum wage. Because before we, as at the last meeting, we were very, very close to signing off. I mean, close in the sense that if the figures were right, it's just to prepare a report and sign. So it's not something that is that lengthy anymore. But we have listened to them. We would take all their plea to our organs, and we would have an organs meeting taking what they have promised and the pleas that they have made to our organs. For now, we don't have the powers to call off the industrial action, so the industrial action will continue while we would have a conversation with our respective organs as soon as possible to lay bare what they have put forward and what they have proposed.
All right, Rufai, we wake up this morning without, at least without a call for the strike being off. So to the best of our knowledge, it's still on. Your take on this story?
I mean, yeah, sad reality that we had to resort to a strike. Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, my amiable Egbon, the Attorney General of the country, was saying that, oh, it's against the Trade Dispute, Act, Section 41 sub 1. They were supposed to give deadlines, I think 15 days notice. But in all fairness to Labour have been talking about this for a while. We had seen this coming. And if we keep touting that illegality of going on strike, I'd like to ask him, as the Attorney General, how many court orders have government respected? Let's start from there. Because if you want to come to equity, that's come with clear hands. So how many court orders have government respected? How's the government helped to deepen the rule of law in this country? How? Especially the executive. Nobody wants strike. Our jury was touting yesterday on television. Yeah, completely true. It distorts the economy. People lose money, we lose revenue and all of that. But when you have a government that constantly shows bad faith, this deal ought to have been sealed. It ought to have been announced on the 1st of May, Workers' Day. That would have been the better time to announce this deal. It's the end of May now, and nothing is happening. What are the figures? Labour is talking about 400 and something thousand. I know That's ridiculous. Federal government says it's going to add 9.5 billion to their wage bill. But the 60,000 the federal government is talking about will not cut it. And that's why I say, can they meet halfway? At least federal government should put forth something a little over 100,000. And let's haggle back and forth before we get something. Labour that could drop from 615,000 to 490 something definitely is willing to do a deal. This was after a lot of people accused Labour of not shifting ground. But today, Labour is well within their right because the government is not meeting them halfway. And at the same time, what I don't understand is the bad faith shown by the government and the fact that, yes, as Mr. Jega argued in his back page column of This Day this morning, we don't have the resource. Yes, it's not the days of Udoji when Nigeria was at war with petrol cash. Yes. But the truth has to be said. Despite the fact that we don't have the resource, this government has indescribably spent indiscriminately. Should we start with over 90 billion for religious travel? Should we start by the 160 million that were even given to the lawmakers like Mr. Akpabio and the likes to be able to buy cars? Should we continue with the 1 trillion spent on 47 kilometers of road at a time where the economy is bleeding? Should we continue with the failed promises? They said they were going to launch CNG by 29th of May. Where are the CNG buses? What happened to the palliative since there was a debacle in the humanitarian ministry? Nothing was done. What happened to the releasing of food from the National Grains Reserve? So we have a lot of things yet undone by this government, and the government keeps missing its priority. So at this point in time, it's sad that we have to go through a strike. Everything's going to be shut down. We hear some local air operators are trying to change their schedules and things like that. But please, government meet labor halfway.
Okay, there are dimensions to this conversation. The first is labor, saying that government has to agree to its own provision of national new minimum wage in Nigeria. That new National Minimum Wage Act of 2019 expired by April 8, 2024. And so there was a need to agree on a new national minimum wage, because what the law says is that every 5 years you renegotiate the new national minimum wage. Now, Labour is now saying that it had given the federal government of Nigeria the deadline of May 21, but the negotiations have been stalled by disagreements. Government offering 54,000, government offering 60,000. Labour saying we are at the level of 615, climbing down to 497, climbing down further to 494,000. In other words, whatever minimum wage is being paid in Nigeria now, at this moment, for the month of May, is illegal because it's not governed by law. Now, what is the derivative from there? The derivative from there, logically, is that organized labor has a right to say that we should take another look at the law, we should renegotiate, and to the extent that organized labor is trying to defend the interest of average Nigerians, of employees, I think that organized labor is in a rightful position in that regard. They are doing their job in accordance with International Labour Organization regulations to defend the rights of workers, to defend the rights of workers to dignity. That's number one. But having said that, let us now look at the Nigerian context. In the Nigerian context, the negotiations have reached a deadlock. So what is government saying? I will try to frame what government is saying through the responses. Now, Nkuruka Onyejocha, who is the main negotiator on behalf of government, has said that government is pleading with the organized labor to reconsider their position, because where is the money going to come from? Government has suffered 100% increase from 30,000 to 60,000. The same 30,000 that states could not pay. State governors, including the Bauchi State governor, my good friend, my cellmate in other times, has already said, look, state governments cannot pay this amount. So says Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State. Other governors will concur with him that they cannot pay. Would they take the position and say, we cannot pay, so we won't pay, which is the title of a play, English playwright called Dario Fo. Okay, then you had the response by Nkuruchas also saying, we cannot pay. She's the minister in charge, she's the main negotiator. Mr. Bayo Ononuga, speaking for the presidency, has also intervened. He says, look, you are asking for 1,547% increase. His position is that it is unrealistic because, again, the federal government cannot pay. And Mr. Bayo Ononuga went for that to say, look, government has provided palliatives in the health sector, in the, in various sectors. Is anybody thinking about this? Are labor leaders living in another country? There's also the intervention by the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, who says, look, let us all be realistic. Let's go back to the negotiating table because what labor is asking for cannot work. However, what is the reality we face? From the perspective of the law, the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice has also intervened to say that, look, this thing is premature, it's illegal, it's unrealistic. And his office has been quoting the Labor Disputes Act of 2004, sections 41 sub 1, section 42 sub 1, and section 36 sub 1. The big issue raised by the Office of the Attorney General is that you have to give notice of 15 days. And the Attorney General's office is saying that 15 days notice has not been given. Therefore, it is unconstitutional. There are other groups, legal drafting groups of lawyers, legal practitioners, also saying that proposition by the Labour Congress is unconstitutional in view of Section 60. That's the specific section, which says there must be public hearing, and that no public hearing has been held. So there is, both from the Office of the Attorney General and from outside, arguments about the law. However, what is the reality? This morning, we have seen a reduced movement on the streets of Lagos. NLC, TUC are saying they are going to send out their, troops, task force, they call it, to enforce the strike. But I think the residual point is about the organized private sector and the points made by Senator Godswill Akpabio of the National Assembly when the National Assembly met with the labor leaders yesterday. To wit, that there will be collateral damage. People will lose their jobs if organized labor is insistent. The organized private sector people are saying the productive sector, the manufacturing sector of Nigeria will be sabotaged because people will not be able to produce. Where, again, as Ononuga and Nkiru Onyejocha asked, where will the money come from? Ononuga did a small calculation. He said, if you had an electricity tariff of 3 trillion, which labor is also asking for, to 9 trillion, that what labor is asking for, that will be about 12 trillion. Where will the money come from? So these are some of the issues on the table. But what do we think? Labor defending the rights, law being followed, sentiments are also expressed by many Nigerians.
Well, I'm glad that a number of sentiments have been expressed by a number of key stakeholders, including government functionaries and some well-meaning Nigerians advocating for a halt of the strike action, citing the damage it would do, further damage, I would say, it would do to the economy and how the people suffer when this happens. However, I think this conversation, or perhaps these opinions and thoughts, should have been put forward not now, but several weeks before. In all honesty, the statements that are being made about the effect of strike actions on the people is legitimate. There are causes for concern, and that is why oftentimes they'd rather not go down the line of a strike action. But in the same vein, the federal government hasn't shown good faith, unfortunately. I mean, right from the time when there had been several, strike actions being threatened by Labour, and they would have conversations, they'll go to the negotiation table, they'll reach 7-point agenda, 17-point agenda. Unfortunately, when we look back at the resolutions from those mediations, many of those promises made by the federal government haven't been fulfilled. So this is not an overnight decision taken by organized labor. In fairness to them, some Nigerians have opined that this is a long time coming. This ought to have been done since, because they have continuously gone to the negotiation table with the federal government without a lot being done in terms of action. Before I cited, where are the CNG buses? We asked this question. Why must it take a strike action, a shutting down of the economy, a downing of tools for the federal government to begin to run here and there to find solutions to what is a glaring problem of the Nigerian people? I think it is unfair to then begin to point fingers at Labour and organize them and say, oh, you're putting the people in further poverty, and this is illegal, when the federal government itself hasn't done what it ought to do in terms of keeping to its own end of the promise. The president of the TUC, Festus Osifo, had mentioned that 2 weeks ago, organized labor went on a nationwide protesting the hike in electricity tariff. That till today, not one single conversation has happened since then from the federal government's end. Let me say, he said, since we undertook the nationwide protest, the recent hike, against the recent hike in electricity tariffs, no government official has called us for discussion. Even the Minister of Power has not thought it fit to invite us for discussion. Then they announced a strike, and everybody's looking for mediations and midnight, evening meetings, midnight meetings, and calling Labour to call off a strike. Why must we get to this point for the federal government to begin to ask? That's the question a lot of Nigerians are asking. Are they saying that they're oblivious to the sufferings of Nigerians? Are they saying they're oblivious to the promises that they made that they haven't yet kept? And now, Labour, having been pushed to the wall, have now said they will embark on an indefinite strike action as a result of the lack of, the show of seriousness from the end of the federal government to show that at least they're making effort. In all fairness, no one wants to down their tools. I don't think you'd ask any worker who'd be willing to, because of the consequences of this. However, one thing you must understand is that if government, in the time when the announcements, these policies that had been made that impoverished people, had shown, even in their body language, in their decisions, in policy directions, that they were on the track to ensuring that Nigerians wouldn't be heavily hit, rather than taking the high stand and not seeming to connect to the people, perhaps we wouldn't be where we are today, where a strike action has been instituted. If the promises had been kept, the CNG buses, and like I mentioned, when the deadline couldn't have been met, could they have made an announcement, a form of communication, continuous communication to the effect that Nigerians know where they stand? It almost seems like the people are being taken for granted. Therefore, organized labor, being at least one organ where people can protest or express displeasure and express, just how much people are suffering in Nigeria, has taken on the decision to go on a strike. If you ask a number of people are saying that, well, we would rather take this and let the government act than continue to keep quiet and nothing is being done. My hope is this, that when they go back to the negotiation tables, it won't just be talk shop, that there will be actions that are smart, so able to be, that are specific, measurable, that they're achievable, they are time-bound, and very importantly, government honors the commitment they make at the negotiation table. Unfortunately, they haven't shown good faith. There's no integrity in terms of the agreements they've made in the past. So I don't understand the assurances that will be made to keep the strikes at bay, because in the past, this hasn't been done. We'll see how this pans out. The most important thing is the Nigerian people who unfortunately keep on bearing the brunt of bad decisions, bad policy directions, and bad leadership. It's very sad, and I hope that people are able to find a way to, find a way around this action that is being taken. The Nigerian Police Force has released a statement as well that people should maintain the peace. It's a strike action, no opportunity for it to be turned around or hijacked. and then turn, into something else that people don't want. It is an act of protest, and it is the right of Nigerians to go on strike, or for organized labor to go on strike. Move on to other news making the rounds this morning. Nigeria's Minister of State, Petroleum Resources, Oil, Senator Heineken Lokobiri, has reiterated Nigeria's dedication to the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies' agreements to extend most of its deep oil output cuts into 2025, exceeding market expectations. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, has reported that Nigeria has paid 98% of airlines' trapped funds in the country and called for the final clearance of the remaining 2%. On to the foreign scene, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on the country's political parties to work together for the good of the country as final results from last week's election confirmed his African National Congress, ANC, lost its majority for the first time. President Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC party won just over 40% of the vote in Wednesday's election, losing its long-held supremacy in South African politics. Over to Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum is set to win a landslide victory to become Mexico's first female president, inheriting the project of her mentor and outgoing leader, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, whose popularity among the poor helped drive her triumph.